There's nothing worse than architecture crits. At least that's what we've been told to think. But why is it this way? I guess it's because we've all heard the horror stories. Models being thrown about, drawings getting ridiculed, and just a general toxic vibe that has supposedly been there for generations. But crits aren't the same anymore. In some architecture schools, they're almost being rebranded. These new reviews are a space for open dialogue and constructive feedback. But architecture students still struggle with preparing for reviews, putting together their portfolio, and speaking confidently in a crit. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can plan for an architecture crit in the most easy way possible. Crits don't need to be the bane of our existence. There are a few ways to make sure that you're well prepared ahead of time and that you get the most out of the conversation. First, we're going to talk about misconceptions of crits and some key points that you should take on board instead. Secondly, we'll talk about how to set realistic goals. And finally, things that you can do during and after your crit to avoid it going south. So, what are some misconceptions about crits? Like I mentioned before, there's almost a preconceived assumption that crits are the worst thing in architecture school. And trust me, as an introvert, I completely get how scary and pointless it can seem. But over the course of your journey as an architecture student, you start to realize how these reviews can actually benefit your project in the long term. Some of this does depend on the studio environment, such as guest critics and what your tutors expect of you, but there are ways to gain control of how your review goes. The first bit of advice I would give to any architecture student is to not miss a review. I've seen students who have really great work miss out on purpose to avoid the possibility of having a bad outcome. But this only harms you in the process and actually wastes the time of your tutors as well. Think about it this way, you're paying all this money towards this course, and especially with architecture, there's a limited amount of contact time where you're actually getting to engage with your tutors or industry professionals or even your peers. So are you really going to let that money go down the drain? Even if you're not a fan of speaking in a group, it gives you that opportunity to just practice, as this is something that you might have to do later on as an architect. Another benefit of attending review days are that you can listen to other people and other reviews to get an understanding of how your peers approach the design project too. Sometimes architecture school can seem a bit closed off, which often means that you live inside this bubble and you're not really exposed to different methods of research or creative thinking, but there's always something to learn. The second misconception about crits is that you have to have a finished project or a set of drawings. Now, unless this is your final review before a deadline, you typically won't need to have completed work unless your tutors have told you to. And remember, this is a chance for you to get feedback on your ideas. The review should be a moment during your project where you step back to get the bigger picture or plan the trajectory. The third misconception is that you have to spend a ton of money printing out pages and creating expensive models. Of course, each project is different, but don't feel like you have to invest so much money to try and impress your tutors or guest critics with an expensive prototype model that's most likely not going to be of use later on. Same thing with printing. If you have the option to present on a screen, then do it. There's no right or wrong, as you're just there to kind of get advice and feedback on your work. This is also made a lot easier when you have roundtable discussions or tabletop reviews where everyone lays out their work instead of pinning it up. Now let's talk about setting realistic goals for yourself. Most architecture students struggle to keep on top of deadlines alongside some of their other projects and modules, but you don't have to be one of those students. The best way to prepare for a review and stay on top of things is to just give your project a little pause. This means you're not working on anything new outside of what your tutors have already asked you to do. I know it's really tough to try and not add more onto your workload when you think that an extra drawing or an extra render will complete your presentation, but don't fall for this trap. First, you need to review what you already have. If this is the first review of the semester, it's a good point to put together a portfolio if you're not already doing so. I would print these portfolio pages at a small scale so that it fits onto a few pages of A4 paper, and then just start annotating them with a red pen. Here you're looking for any gaps, things that you need to redo or improve, and whether or not the portfolio makes sense. This is really important because just like your portfolio, your presentation should also have a flow or narrative to it. Next, you should plan a list of outcomes. So if you haven't been given any, don't add more work for yourself. Just focus on getting a well-rounded set of work that you can present and add some ideas for what you want to work on next. I would recommend a maximum of 10 tasks to be completed over 2 weeks. Then you want to assign dates for each outcome. Now, this method is just giving yourself a fake deadline, but if you struggle with sticking to fake deadlines, try and do this exercise with a friend instead. That way you can keep each other accountable. Lastly, you want to draw out a project roadmap. Now, this is going to give you a clearer idea of what stage your project is at and what the next steps are. For example, if you've done your site research and developed some initial ideas, but haven't really had the chance to come up with a first iteration of drawings, then that's your next step. As obvious as it is, and to avoid putting the pressure on yourself to get those drawings done, maybe you could try doing sketches or collages instead. It doesn't always have to be drawings. Finally, let's talk about how to present your work and the steps you should take after a review. When I was in first year, I was absolutely terrified of presenting my work, and they don't really give you any kind of guidelines for that sort of thing. So something that I picked up from one of my friends whose first language isn't English was to write out a little script. Now, I don't think this should be word for word because then you risk seeming robotic during your review, but you can practice this on your own or record yourself or even practice with other people to get feedback. I also like to take this time to write a small project summary, like the ones that we do for the end of year exhibition, because we tend to disassociate from our projects when it comes to reviews because they turn into this big thing that needs to be impressive. So spend a few moments to just figure out what makes you excited about this project. And keeping that passion and interest alive will only benefit you in the long run because no one likes working on a boring project. The review is your chance to throw out some crazy ideas and just to see if they stick. Once you have done all of those things and actually gone through with the review, make sure to spend a few moments reviewing your notes and making a plan of action. Depending on your energy levels, this could be immediately after the review or even the next day. If you can, try and record your review so that you can listen back to any feedback and evaluate whether or not you want to take it on board. Then you can spend maybe like half an hour putting together a plan of action for the next week or month and focus on what you've been asked to do first. Once you have done 2 or 3 reviews, you get the hang of it, and most students become comfortable with presenting their work amongst other people. I think the key thing to take away from this is that crits are changing. If we have a positive and professional attitude towards planning phase, then the feedback that we receive should be the same. If by any chance you do feel like your review didn't go as planned, or you feel like you've been pushed into a different direction that you don't want to go in, don't panic. We can often get swayed as students to go along with whatever our tutors suggested, but remember, at the end of the day, it is your project and you know it best. So don't be afraid to offer your suggestions and put your foot down when you see a dead end. Similarly, if you're feeling lost or confused about the direction that you're headed in, remember that you can always contact your tutors afterwards and have a separate discussion to plan the next steps. So although not all of us love crits, or should I say reviews, they aren't so bad to navigate around when you've got somewhat of a plan. I think the architecture community needs to avoid preconceptions about toxic behaviour and actively work to change them instead, and it just starts from us. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing for more content like this. I'll see you guys next time.